The Joseph Series, Story Number 6, Joseph Interprets Pharaoh's Dreams, taken from Genesis chapter 41, verses 1 through 43. Can you imagine the excitement and anticipation Joseph must have felt when the chief cupbearer left the prison that day to reclaim his place at Pharaoh's side? It seems almost impossible to imagine how the cupbearer could forget what Joseph had just done for him. But as the days and weeks and months went by without any word, the disappointment Joseph felt must have been crushing. Had God forgotten him? This story begins with these painful but hopeful words. 2 years later. 2 years later, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile River. As he looked, 7 cows came out of the river and began feeding on the reeds along the riverbank. The cows were well fed and healthy looking. Then, as Pharaoh watched, 7 more cows came up from the river and stood beside the other cows on the banks of the Nile. But these cows were thin and ugly. Then the thin, ugly-looking cows ate up the 7 fattened, healthy cows, and Pharaoh woke up. Then Pharaoh fell back asleep, and he dreamed again. As he watched, he saw 7 heads of grain, all growing on one stalk, and all the heads of grain were ripe and healthy-looking. But after that, another stalk sprouted. It also had 7 heads of grain, but these heads were shriveled up, as if diseased by the east wind. Then the 7 thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, ripe heads of grain. And Pharaoh woke up, but it was just a dream. In the morning, Pharaoh's spirit was still troubled. So he sent and called for the magicians and all the wise men of Egypt. And Pharaoh told them about his dreams, but none of them could tell Pharaoh what they meant. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, "I am reminded of my past offenses today. When Pharaoh was angry with his servants and put the chief baker and myself in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, both the chief baker and I dreamed a dream on the same night, and each of our dreams had its own interpretation. There was a young Hebrew there in the prison with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. When we told him our dreams, he told us what they meant. In fact, he told each of us what our dreams meant. And everything he told us happened just like he said. I was restored to my position, but the chief baker was hanged." So Pharaoh sent and called for Joseph, who was quickly brought out of the pit. And when Joseph had shaved and changed his clothes, he came in and stood before Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I have had a dream, and no one here can tell me what it means. But I have been told that when you hear a dream, you can say what it means." Joseph answered Pharaoh and said, "It is not something in me, but God will give Pharaoh a favorable answer." Then Pharaoh told Joseph, "In my dream I was standing on the banks of the Nile River. 7 cows that looked fat and healthy came up out of the Nile and began feeding on the reed grass. Then 7 others came out of the river. But these looked awful. They were sickly and thin. You would not find cows like these anywhere in the land of Egypt. Then the thin, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat, healthy cows that came out first. But you wouldn't know it by looking at them. Even after they ate the other cows, they were just as thin as they were before. Then I woke up, and I dreamed again. I saw 7 heads of grain that grew on one stalk. The grain was ripe and healthy looking. Then 7 other heads of grain sprang up on another stalk. But this grain was withered, as if diseased by the east wind. And as I watched, the 7 withered heads of grain ate the good, healthy heads of grain. I told all of this to the magicians, but no one can tell me what it means." Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "The dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has revealed to Pharaoh something he is about to do. The 7 fattened cows are 7 years, and the 7 healthy heads of grain are 7 years. The dreams are one. The 7 thin and sick cows that came out of the river after the others are also 7 years. And the 7 heads of grain, withered by the east wind, are 7 years as well. 7 years of famine. It is just like I said to Pharaoh. God is showing Pharaoh what he is about to do. The next 7 years there will be abundant crops throughout the land of Egypt. But the 7 years after that will be years of famine, a famine so severe that the years of abundance will be forgotten. The famine will consume the entire land, making the years of good crops seem as if they never even happened. The famine will be that severe. The reason Pharaoh had 2 dreams is because the famine is absolutely determined by God, and because God is going to do it very soon. Knowing this, I would urge Pharaoh to choose a man who is both discerning and wise, and give him authority over the entire land of Egypt. Pharaoh should move quickly to appoint overseers throughout the land, to take 1/5 of the crops produced in the land of Egypt during the 7 good years. Instruct the overseers to gather all the food produced during the good years that are coming, and store the grain in the cities under Pharaoh's authority. The grain can be held in reserve throughout the land, in preparation for the 7 years of famine that are coming on the land of Egypt. That way the nation will not be destroyed when the famine comes." And what Joseph proposed pleased Pharaoh, as well as all of his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, "Where can we find another man like this one? Someone who has the Spirit of God in him." Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Because God has shown all of this to you, there is no one else who is as wise and discerning as you are. Therefore, I am putting you in charge of my entire house. All of my people will take their orders from you, whatever you command. The only place I will be greater than you is in the throne room." And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Behold, I have made you the ruler over all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signet ring off his hand and put it on Joseph's hand. And Pharaoh clothed Joseph in fine linen and placed a chain of gold around his neck. And Pharaoh had Joseph ride in the chariot next to his. And those who went ahead of Joseph called out, "Bow the knee!" So Pharaoh made Joseph ruler over the entire land of Egypt. The Joseph Series, Story number 6. Joseph interprets Pharaoh's dreams. Taken from Genesis chapter 41, verses 1 through 43.